All right, welcome to College Football Monday, a Sons of Saturday live show on YouTube. You can check us out on the Sons of Saturday VT YouTube channel. It is brought to you by Jack and Coke. You see the can down there at the bottom of the screen. I am tonight's host, Sam Jesse. Pete is still traveling back from Nashville, licking his wounds to be precise. And I am joined here by Sons of Saturday contributor and Sports Business Journal daily staff writer, Robert Irby. Thanks for joining us, Irby.
Of course, always a pleasure. You and Pete are my favorite people to podcast with. So,
well, we're very, very happy about that. And Robert does great work for us on sonsofsaturday.com, especially with the Locks of Saturday articles. So great stuff coming out there. We're going to talk a little bit of Hokies, don't worry, but we're also going to talk about what's going on in college football around the country. That is the job of this show. This is the Sons of Saturday national show, and we're really excited to get along to it. In this episode, we're going to talk a little bit of what happened in week one, as well as looking to week two, cover some of the big games, where the playoff picture looks right now early in the season. And of course, we will talk about the Hokies' unfortunate trip down to Nashville. But to get things started off, Robert, who lost the weekend? Who is done after this one? Let's just get it going.
Every team in the ACC not named Miami. I mean, truthfully, I think any chance the conference had to get more than one team is effectively dead. I mean, I know that there weren't as many losses per se, but I mean, even the perception of like NC State having a squeaker against Western Carolina, it's just the conference is in really bad shape right now. And I think Miami and maybe Louisville look pretty good, but other than those teams, like it's a mess.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. I mean, the ACC really does, if Virginia Tech continues to struggle, if NC State continues to struggle, I know I'm wearing the Tuffy shirt today. I know they squeaked out a win. We'll talk about them. But yeah, not looking great for the ACC. I'm going to throw out there LSU. We'll get to that game coming up here, but LSU only scoring 20 points against a new look USC team. We'll get into that game more in depth, but with their schedule coming up here, they were a top 10 team, fringe top 10. A lot of people had them in the playoff. My program power rankings model had them in the playoff. I don't see it now. I don't see how they can make it unless they win the SEC. So LSU is a loser for me. Let's talk about, a little bit into that SEC. There were some big games there. One of them, Georgia Clemson, which we will get to in a little bit, but also Florida, Miami. That was a tough look for Florida, tough look for LSU. Texas looked really good. I think that's a positive. Alabama waxed Western Kentucky, but you have South Carolina struggling as well. So we'll get to know a little bit about the SEC more as Tennessee faces NC State next week. But the SEC had some up, had some down.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it was really interesting how well the newcomers did, because not only did Texas do well, but Oklahoma looked really good as well. Granted, they're playing Temple, so, is what it is. But I mean, they were blanketing them on both sides of the ball. And, I'll talk more about Oklahoma in a bit, but I'm very high on what they can be because of what Venables brings to the table. Of if Oklahoma can actually play defense and have an electric offense with Jackson Arnold, I mean, the sky is truly the limit. So I was really impressed with them.
A team that I was not impressed with, I think they might be done now, is the Texas A&M Aggies, a team I really liked heading into this season. We'll talk about that game against Notre Dame here coming up. But man, oh man, that just didn't look good. Like they never looked good. But let's talk, before we get to that, about some positives. Some of our best week one quarterback performances. I'll start with this one. Cam Ward just looked unbelievable versus Florida. You talked about Jackson Arnold. He was playing Temple. Oklahoma scores 50 plus. He didn't even play most of the second half. But I just think Cam Ward, man, looks like a Heisman.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I think he was awesome. I think Noah Fafita from Arizona did a great job of doing his job, which is throw the ball to your Mike Evans clone, McMillan. And then I also think, Oh gosh, I forgot who I was going to say. Oh, Carson Beck. Duh. Carson Beck looked awesome. He tore up that Clemson defense. Just did what he needed to do, and that's all Georgia's going to ask for their quarterbacks is just don't screw it up. And he went above and beyond on that.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about Riley Leonard here in a little bit. I thought he
Mhm.
did enough, nothing spectacular, but he did enough to win that game. And I kind of have to say it, Robert. Diego Pavia.
Yeah,
I mean, the dude is just a gamer. We talked about this all summer long. The guy just wins football games. And if they can get that kind of performance out of him throughout the season, they're going to have chances in games. Like they're going to be competitive. I think that's one of the storylines from the Vanderbilt side is this is not going to be a pushover team this year.
no, they're at the very least a well coached team, and it says a lot. Like all those quarterbacks we named for Pavia to be the SEC Player of the Week, like that's significant. He had I think over 400 total yards and like 3 touchdowns. Like it was insane performance. We are bearing the lead a little bit here because Miller Moss looked amazing last night for SC. Lincoln Riley, he's a magician. He does it again. He's the best quarterback coach in the country. Might even be the best quarterback coach in football. Like I might even hold him up against Sean McVay in terms of ability to coach the quarterback. He just knows how to get those guys to maximize their talents and put the ball where it needs to be.
Absolutely agree. And one other guy I wanted to talk about, Drew Aller, Penn State quarterback. They went into Morgantown and waxed the Mountaineers. He was really impressive. And I
Yeah.
think the most impressive part was how consistent that offense was on a drive to drive basis. Passing the ball, they had 10 successful plays. So on 56% of their passing plays, they were successful. That's really good. That's going to get the job done. And so I think when you look at Penn State this year in the Big Ten, Oregon is very good. Ohio State is very good. Michigan, they might not be national title, but they are very good. If Drew Aller plays like that, they are in that level and they're going to be in those games. I do not expect Penn State to get blown out by Ohio State or to drop a game to an Iowa or to a Wisconsin or to a Maryland. I don't see that this year. Drew Aller is the real deal. And if you're a Heisman bettor, if you want to get in on some midseason Heisman action, I would not hate Drew Aller with how they're playing and how many big games he is going to be in.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And I think he's another guy kind of like Beck, where he's not asked to do too much because I think the guy that really impressed me the most for Penn State was Nicholas Singleton, the running back. He's a guy that, we've been kind of waiting to see him really break out. He was the number one running back in his class a couple of years ago, a former 5-star. Um, I've described him as Nick Chubb with hands before. Um, and he averaged a whopping 8.8 yards per carry against West Virginia. He absolutely ran through them and was just dominant physically. And if Aller has a guy like that to hand the ball off to, plus Katron Allen, makes his job a lot easier and a really good defense under Tom Allen. So it's, I don't mind it. I think he can get some good numbers that way.
Let's move on really quickly. Some 3 teams that impressed you. Mine are pretty quick: Notre Dame, Miami, and USC. Those are my 3 teams. They were in 3 of the biggest spots, and they went out there and they've won. But not only did they win, Robert, they showed improvement from what they were poor at last year. USC, defense greatly improved. Miami, offense greatly improved. And then Notre Dame, winning in the big spots. Marcus Freeman has sneakily put up a really good coaching resume
Yeah.
while at Notre Dame. Even though they haven't been national title caliber the whole time, they have won some really big games and they've won them convincingly. And I think for Notre Dame to lose everything they lost on the offensive line, I believe they had 6 combined total starts on the offensive line.
Yeah.
To lose a playmaker on offense like Chris Tyree, they still went into the Lions' den and won that game, and they only let up 13 points to a Texas A&M team with a lot of offensive weapons. I think Notre Dame might have won the week.
Yeah, and they've put themselves very much in the driver's seat for a college football playoff spot. But the teams that I want to point out, I'll echo Miami. I think that
Yeah.
goes without saying. I think it's arguably the most impressive performance of any team this week. to go into the swamp. And I know Florida's not good this year. We know that, but that's a tough place to play and it's a tough place to win. Just ask Utah a couple years ago, when they were vastly superior to that Florida team with Anthony Richardson. But I also really loved what Alabama did. There's something to be said about beating the absolute brakes off of a team that you should. I mean, this is a team that was on the ropes against South Florida last year, and there were questions about what this offense would look like with DeBoer and what his scheme looks like versus what Milroe can do. And, can he bridge that gap there? Because do you want Milroe throwing it as often as Michael Penix? Probably not. But they made it happen, and the defense looked good. They've got good players. And then I do just want to throw out USC. I think that that is just a huge defining win for their program. And I think as you move past the Caleb Williams era and you move into the Miller Moss era, I suppose, I think it was impressive for me how they were able to get a big win against a premier opponent like that, but also to hold LSU, which is known for its offense, to 20 points. I think SC still has some questions, I think particularly in the run game. LSU just wasn't a very good running team, so they weren't really able to take advantage. So the tackling in their front seven isn't great, but I thought that the secondary did pretty well, and kept Nussmeier uncomfortable. So I was very impressed.
Can I talk about a team that we haven't talked about yet? Two of them actually,
please.
out west. One of them, UNLV, with a dominant win over Houston. I know Houston isn't very good, and they have a new coach. Willie Fritzel, he'll figure it out there if anyone can. But
yeah,
a 20-point win against a Power 4 team, and you lost your starting quarterback.
Right.
UNLV,
their quarterback situation's a disaster, and they figured it out.
I'll tell you what, man. With how Boise State's defense looked against Georgia Southern, they allowed 45 points to Georgia Southern. They scored 56, but they allowed 45. Man, UNLV might be sneaking their way into the conversation of the group of 5 teams to get into the playoff. Watch out for the Runnin' Rebs. And another one, Arizona State beat the absolute brakes off Wyoming. Another team in Wyoming that has a new coach, but they have a good amount of experience from a team that made a bowl game last year. Arizona State beat them 48-7. Hand up. I was one of the only people rooting for Arizona State this offseason. That's a team that plays really, really hard. They play very fast, and they just had so much BS go on the last few years. It feels like they have a clean slate. Kenny Dillingham has those guys ready to play. It's one game, but that was a game a lot of people had as a toss-up when you're looking at Arizona State's win total at 4.5. They won with flying colors. They get a game against Mississippi State. They get a game against Texas State. If they play like that, they'll win both of those games.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe Texas State I feel a little more iffy about just because I think they're a wagon. I've been
they're a better team than Mississippi State. They're a better team than Mississippi State.
100%. Yeah, honestly, I didn't follow that result as closely as I should have. I had no idea that game even happened. Forgive me.
I saw that score, and I was about 9 PBRs deep at Roberts in Nashville.
Hey, shout out.
Shout out to Roberts. 250 PBRs on Broadway in Nashville. So shout out to Roberts. That's the place to go. All right. 3 teams that disappointed. I mean, I'll just put it up here.
Shout out to Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, death on a plate. That's kind of how I feel right now. Yeah, I mean, Virginia Tech just not looking good at all, man. I think if a team lost the week, it might be Virginia Tech. I hate to say that, but it really is. The only team who is a double-digit favorite to not win outright was Virginia Tech this week. 9 Power 4 teams lost in this week. Well, I guess it'll be 10 after tonight. One of them was the Hokies. So Power 4 teams, no matter will go 62-10 this week. I mean, I'm just sad, man. I'm just sad. They lost the week.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Another team disappointed. Honestly, I'm sitting here watching them play right now. Florida State look talking live right now. Florida State looks pretty bad against Boston College right now. Um, they've had 2 3 and outs. Boston College is up 7-0 and has the ball again. DJ just looks shell shocked out there.
Which is
Yep.
so strange because he's played so much football.
Yeah.
He's
No,
been here for so long.
it's I don't know. It's just there's just something going on there where you can tell he just doesn't look confident out there. And meanwhile, Thomas Castellanos is like, I'm gonna sling this thing wherever I want to. I don't care who catches it, no matter what team they're on. He's as confident as they get.
I don't have the score in front of me. What is it now? What's the I don't think you can
7-0,
tell what the
but BC has the ball as well. It's in the second quarter.
Okay, so 7-0 BC has the ball, winning 7-0.
Yes.
Ooh, interesting.
Florida State does not have a first down.
That's I need man, oh man.
Yeah.
Man, oh man. Yeah, add Florida State to that no matter what happens tonight. I'd also say Florida was really bad. We're going to talk about the game in a little bit, so I don't want to put that out there. But Florida and Clemson were both pretty bad, and I think A&M as well, disappointing. But
one
NC
more
State,
I'll throw in there. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was wearing them right now. NC State, man, it took them 3 quarters to wake up. You and I have talked offline. I think I've talked on the Too Deep podcast a bit that as much as I am a pseudo fan of NC State, having lived in Raleigh, my partner going to NC State, there are red flags with NC State this year. And Western Carolina carved them up and had the momentum for most of that game. I'm a little bit worried about NC State next week. We'll get to that game, but I'm just saying. Your final thoughts on teams that disappointed?
Oregon. I mean, I don't know what happened. Like that, if you look at the stats, like Oregon should have won that game by 40, but they were letting Idaho just squeak around.
I've seen multiple Twitter threads about that game, about like how in the world was the score what it was. But dude,
I mean, Dylan Gabriel set the school record for most completions in a game and beat Idaho by 10.
That's hilarious. Like that's actually funny.
He had a very Heisman-esque performance, but the other 21 players did not, I guess.
No, man, that's kind of shocking. I think that's a game to circle for next week. Boise State travels to Eugene to play Oregon.
Wow, yeah.
That's a very important game for both teams. I don't think you're putting must win on it, but if you're Oregon, you got to hold serve at home. And if you're Boise State, this is your opportunity. Like this is your Super Bowl for the year. So that's going to be an interesting game. I like the Ducks in it though. I think the Ducks could roll because I don't see Boise State getting many stops. Let's talk about some of the games that we saw this weekend. Let's go back to Aggie land where the Notre Dame Fighting Irish 23, Texas A&M 13. We've talked about some of this, but I'm going to give you a stat here on a guy that I picked to potentially win the Heisman. Hand up. Connor Wegman in 4 starts versus top 30 defenses has never thrown for more than 160 yards.
Oof. That hurts.
He plays in the SEC. I don't know if you heard about SEC defenses. They aren't what they used to be, but that's not good. That offense really missed Ruben Owens. He was a star freshman for him last year. He's like a scat back, running back, do it all, Christian McCaffrey-esque kind of player. They really missed him because it looked like they had no go-to guy on that offense all night.
No, and this was my concern for them coming into the game is, I just didn't feel like they had much firepower, and I also didn't love what they had in the trenches, and I feel like that kind of showed itself. I feel like they really weren't able to get much going in the run game either. And ultimately Notre Dame, I think this was just 2 really good defenses, and I think Notre Dame's offense did just enough to carry them over the top. I wasn't overly impressed with them either, but I think that A&M, they've just got a long way to go. And this is kind of the rub with an Elko team is as great as he can be, and he can turn around a program and he can put together a great defense. The offenses can be questionable. Sorry, Boston College just got a long pass on a wheel route. Um,
I
yeah.
have the under in that game that I feel good about, and I have that parlayed with Florida State money line.
Mm.
Florida State's a place where they're going to hit the panic button real fast.
Oh, well,
And
I mean, if they lose this game, they are effectively out of the ACC championship already. Like to start
yes,
0 and
yeah,
2 in
2
the
losses.
conference,
And you still have games against Miami and Clemson.
and it's September 2nd.
Yeah, that's
I
tough.
mean,
That's tough. I
oof.
I mean, not to harp on that too much, but Dave Aranda went 10-2 and won the Big 12 at Baylor, and he's probably going to get fired middle of this season. That was
Mhm.
like 2 years ago. Justin Fuente won 10 games and made the ACC title game. He got fired 3 years later.
Dan
4
Mullen.
years later, Dan Mullen did stuff like this. This stuff happens in college football. It is a what have you done for me lately business. Let's get to 2 programs that really haven't done anything for anybody lately. Miami, the Hurricanes, 41-17 beatdown in Gainesville. This was from start to finish a dominant performance. Cam Ward was everything he was advertised to be. He did have some moments. He's an
Yeah,
moments quarterback,
he is.
but he shows the physical tools, and that wide receiver core was running open all game long. They dominated the line of scrimmage. The defense was dominant. I think Florida really only had one big play on offense, and it was a long run. I think it was like a 60-yard run down the sidelines. I said it earlier in the show, like I legitimately think Cam Ward is the leader in the Heisman race right now.
No, I think that's fair. I think it's him or Miller Moss at the moment.
Mhm.
But going into last night, I would have 100% said Cam Ward or Beck. I think it's one of those 3. But yeah, I think that Miami, this is the best roster top to bottom that Miami has had, dare I say, since they joined the ACC.
Oh yeah,
I'm,
I think
I mean,
that's very likely. Yeah.
yeah, and and there may be some coaching questions about Miami. Cristobal has had some hiccups here and there, but Miami's the type of team where they're talented enough to where it doesn't matter against a lot of teams. And I think what it's going to take to beat them is either an absolute juggernaut like Georgia or a team that is extremely well coached. And
Mhm.
that's just not Florida. It just isn't.
Yeah. And, I think with Cam Ward, like we've seen this when he was at Washington State, he would have games where he looked like a first round NFL quarterback.
Mhm.
And then he would have games where you're like, how in the world does this guy ever look like a first round NFL quarterback? He has games where he looked really bad. He's going to have one of those games this year. But
He
is
is.
Miami good enough everywhere else? Nobody has talked about Damian Martinez and how good that guy is.
You love that
Behind
guy.
that offensive line, he is a monster. And that defense continues to just wreak havoc everywhere. I have some of the advanced stats pulled up here, and I'm clicking through them. If you see me looking over here, my monitor's a little too far to the left on me here. But I am just, I mean, Miami's defense only let up 3 explosive plays, only 1 passing explosive play. Um, but some of these stats are just hilarious. They had a 44% stop rate. Stop rate means that the opponent's offensive possession ended in a turnover on downs, or a punt. 44% of Florida's drives ended like that. They really dominated this game. So,
Mhm.
dude, I think Miami is not only the leader to win the ACC right now, which would put them in a top 4 spot, but
Yeah.
one of our commenters talked about drinking the Virginia Tech Kool-Aid. You might want to drink the Miami Kool-Aid.
Yeah, I mean, if you mixed green and orange flavored Kool-Aids, it probably tastes pretty good. I don't
Like a
know.
lime orange situation. I
Yeah,
could get
yeah.
down for that. I could do that.
Very citrusy, yes.
All right, next game. This one took place in Atlanta, the second home of Georgia football. They roll 34-3 over Clemson. Everything we thought about Clemson potentially being wrong is true. They offensively are a mess. They lack depth at almost every key position. And even though they got healthy at wide receiver, they do not have a lot of game breakers on offense. They still don't have Will Shipley. Will Shipley, of course, left for the NFL. He was their main guy offensively last year. I understand they played Georgia in Atlanta, which is basically playing a road game against Georgia. But I am a little bit worried that Clemson might be done.
Yeah.
Because they didn't look close in this game ever.
I think this year is going to be a struggle for them. I think it comes down to purely just a misevaluation of their own talent. I pulled up a tweet here from my good buddy David Hale from ESPN, and he said, "I've said this before, but it warrants repeating. The portal thing is a red herring with Clemson. The problem is an overestimation of its own players. Dabo has kicked the tires in the portal. He just never finds players he likes more than the ones he has, and that's bad." And it is. I mean, sure, if you want to tell me, hey, we don't want to bring in a defensive lineman because we've got, Peter Woods and all these other monsters up there. Great.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. But if you were delusional enough to think that you're basically every offensive player you have, except for Brenningstool and Maffa, was capable of winning a national championship,
dude,
I don't know what to tell you, man. I really don't.
Yeah, and if there are any Georgia, we have 301 people live watching this on YouTube right now. So first off, thank you to all of them. If any one of those 301 are Georgia fans, you get all the credit. We understand you're really good. You didn't even have ETN on offense, and you still rolled over Clemson. We get it. The storyline for this game is Clemson's just complete lack of depth across the board. Like, I watched the condensed version of that game this morning, and it was like anytime Georgia ran 2 or 3 plays together and they had to make defensive line subs, they had to make a potential linebacker sub in their nickel formation, they just got smoked the next play. Like, they were not at the same level. Offensively, we know they're a joke. They only had 1 explosive play on offense in that game. Only 1.
Yeah.
Another
thing too is their receivers.
Man.
Like, they hyped up, they brought in 2 freshmen. One's a 5-star, one's a high 4-star. Like, these guys that are extremely talented receivers that, Dabo had made it seem like we're going to play a lot as true freshmen. Those guys finished with 2 catches for 12 yards. And it's like, these are the guys that you've been hyping up. These are the guys you brought in, and you're not even giving them the ball. So it's like, I don't know, man.
Jeez, yeah. I mean, Clemson, it's a long, let's preface this entire podcast.
No. This is week 1. We overreact. This is what we do.
It is week 1. Virginia Tech could still go 10-2. Clemson could still go 11-1.
Hey, both of those teams could theoretically go 11-1. Shoot.
I mean, there is still a world where both Virginia Tech and Clemson make the college football playoff. Like, that is like this sport is crazy for a reason. Do not kill yourself overreacting to week 1. But I'm going to just tell you right now, there is no shot Clemson can even compete with the top 5, 6, 7 teams in the country right now. I mean, Texas dismantled Colorado State, and that's a team that should finish over 500 and should be in the top half of the Mountain West.
And a tough football team. Like, that's a hard team to dismantle.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they're a little bit dirty, but
maybe the Draymond Green kind of toughness.
Yeah. No, they are an entire program of Draymond Greens. That's a perfect way to put it. For those of you who don't stay up and watch Mountain West football, what are you doing?
Get it together.
All right, our last game that we really want to highlight, we've talked about it a lot, the Southern California Trojans, who put out maybe the most well-produced hype video I have ever seen. I mean, they should. They're an entire university full of either astronauts or TV producers, but that was sick.
It was sick.
I mean, they had missed opportunities in this game, and they still beat LSU in a very 50-50 crowd. Miller Moss was spectacular. That team has playmakers all over the field. Zachariah Branch, they got 2 or 3 tight ends. The offensive line looks good.
Branch is electric.
Branch is awesome.
Yeah.
The defense, though, I mean, they were swarming to the football. The tackling vastly improved. You saw them bow up after that first LSU drive. I think it was like a 13-play drive. LSU goes for it on 4th. They get stuffed. Like, the attitude feels very different with this USC team.
It does. And I you got coaching changes across the board, especially on the defensive side, getting rid of Alex Grinch and you can definitely see a mindset shift. They don't feel like a doormat anymore. Like I said, I still have some questions. I think that their defensive line is very good at rushing the passer, but I think that they still struggle with run fits. and same with their linebackers, but it's not as bad, and it's ultimately it's maskable. Um, and that was really their issue, especially last year, was their defense was just so bad that even Caleb Williams couldn't mask it.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's a long way from that, and truly the sky is the limit for them as well, as long as they can keep everything balanced.
Yeah. And I another bullet point I have before we get to some advanced stats on this game. Bad game for overbetters.
Oh,
LSU takes up the whole first quarter on a 13-play drive, gets no points. USC misses a field goal at the end of the first half. It just these both all offense were playing really well, and they didn't even touch the over. That was a weird game, and I think something to think about as we go into the rest of this season. Teams are really struggling to get going in the first quarter
yeah.
across the board, so something to keep in mind. The LSU defense. I thought I put in the Locks of Saturday article. I thought that they would get fixed. Blake Baker, defensive coordinator from Missouri, he came in, did not fix it. Did not fix it for these guys. They allowed 10.5 yards per passing attempt, and they had 3 defensive pass interferences. They only
Mhm.
had a 33% stop rate. I'm telling you, I'm worried about LSU in this
Yeah.
SEC. There are so many good offenses on their schedule.
To me, they're like I'd almost describe them as a smoke and mirrors kind of defense, because I think if you look at them, they're they look the part, right? They have these massive dudes that all look like they could play on Sundays, and then they get out there and they really don't know what they're doing. And I
That
remember one play in particular where the USC running back runs right and then he cuts back to the left, and the defensive end is right there, like swarming him. And I'm like, oh man, this guy's about to get pile driven. And he tried to body slam him and ended up throwing him forward and like just pushing him forward. And he like ran for 8 more yards. And like that was the quintessential piece where it's like the guy was in the right place and made the worst play possible.
Yeah, I think it's just like at some point for LSU, you have to get back to your roots, and that is a defensive program. And I understand winning, like I get it. I understand the offensive flair, but they just don't seem to have put a big effort into getting this defense better. Like they lost out
Mm,
time and time again in the portal. Uh, they just could not get anybody to supplement that. I know they got the defensive coordinator, but I
mhm.
just think they don't have a lot of dogs on that defense anymore. They have a lot of guys who look the part, but they just are not dogs. And a team like USC, who you rag on them for being soft and all, that offensive line is massive and they are mobile. And they
Mm.
were dominating that game. Like we talked about the missed field goal at half, but they had some other missed opportunities. Like USC could have easily put up 35 plus in this game.
Absolutely. And but even in that, they still their backs were against the wall and they knew that they should have scored more points, and they went out there and they did what they needed to do, putting together that ending drive. And that really impressed me, because that's not a lot of teams can do that. And not a lot of quarterbacks can do that.
All righty. And let's talk a little bit quickly about around the ACC really quickly. Um, quick bullet points. My first one, NC State. Took them a little bit to get going. I'm a little worried about them. We talked about Clemson. Florida State looks like trash. Miami looks awesome. UNC, not very impressive. They barely snuck out of that game against Minnesota on the back of 2 missed field goals from Minnesota's normally very good kicker. Quick
Hmm.
thoughts on the Tar Heels before we talk about the Hokies.
Questions at quarterback, obviously. I was never high on Max Johnson anyway, but the broken leg, and now it's Connor Harrell's show, and I just don't know if that's really what Mac Brown ever wanted. Um, yeah, I don't know. Their defense looks a little better, but that might have just been because Minnesota's offense is horrific. They need to give Amari and Hampton the ball 30 times a game if they want to win.
Yeah, I think that's their only option. They just don't seem to have a lot of the playmakers. And in Minnesota, not a ton going on offense there. I think PJ Fleck might be on a bit more of a hot seat than people think. That is a program with a good amount of fan base backing, and I think eventually the 500 is not going to work for them.
No,
And
he
speaking
needed
of,
that win. He needed it.
yeah, and speaking of a program that needs to do a little bit better than 500, and also has a defense like LSU with a lot of really good looking players and not a lot of good looking plays. Let's add Mike Holmes the Sons of Saturday football film analyst, former high school football coach. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Sam, Robert, it's a pleasure to be on with y'all. Wow, what a weekend. That's about all I can say so far.
Yeah, dude, let's just talk Hokies real quick because we're not going to spend a ton of time on this, right? But I wanted to get your thoughts from the game. I was there in Nashville. Robert was watching in Charlotte. Is there anything that you saw that explains what happened there? Because that is just a dumbfounding result for the Hokies.
As someone who has tried to figure out a way to get a group of younger kids motivated to step out on the field for the opening game, I mean, you're seeing it right now with the Florida State. I'm watching the Florida State and BC game. BC is now up 14-0, and Florida State does look. The preseason hype, Nick Saban said it best, it is rat poison. And no matter how much you try to, as a coach, to tell your kids to ignore it, how much you try to tell your kids to say, this is not something we pay attention to, it is something that you cannot ignore. It gets into social media, it gets into everything else. And I really think that we thought we'd be able to roll out there, and this happens with kids that roll out there in the first half and they feel like it's a walk through game and they get punched in the mouth. And, and that's, Mike Tyson famously said, everyone's got a game plan until you get punched in the mouth. And I think our game plan wasn't very good. Offense, defense, I don't think we had a very good game plan going in. I think our players, didn't feel like they needed to go as hard as they needed to. We can talk about that a little bit more. But bottom line is, it's not the best way to kick your season off.
Yes, we're going to get into a couple specific moments here. And the first one I want to get into is opening drive. You let up a big play on third down on a fade route. It happens. You get the stop. You give up a field goal. You're okay, right? 3-0 to start the game. That tipped interception. Man, I'll tell you what, I had multiple people text me right after that. If that ball gets to Jalen Lane on the tunnel screen, it was a tunnel screen into the blitz. He was gone. There was no one there, and he had two blockers in front of him. Do you think that kind of play, a tip ball interception on your own half after you're only down 3-0, it looked like the team after that just went into, fetal position. And it took them another 2 quarters to get out of it.
Yeah, not as much the team necessarily, but I think specifically Kyron Drones. I think Drones' mentality after that interception, he was scared to look at his first read. He was scared to trust his gut. And, and a lot of our offense with being RPO based and everything that Drones does very well, it is pre-snap read based. We're not asking Kyron Drones to go through 3 and 4 progressions across the field. We're asking him to, hey, let's look at what the defense is giving you right now, pre-snap, and that's determining where you're going to go with the ball. Whether you're going to keep it, if this guy opens up, if that guy bails, the guy on defense bails, and he's going to be able to settle down, yes, we can hit that spot right now. And if he stays anchored down, now we're going to take off and run. That's pretty much the gist of what I feel he's going through in his read progression. But after that tip interception, even though it was not his fault, it was a great play by the defensive lineman, bar none.
Yeah,
great play. It was nothing that he could control, but there's nothing that you can really coach to fix that in between the ears. And I think it really took the rest of that first quarter and the second quarter to get over that. The biggest thing was that had to deal with that same thing. We had 3 possessions in the first half, y'all.
Yeah.
3 possessions in the first half. We never had the football. So there was no opportunity for Drones to really get over the mistakes that he was making early on in the ball game. That one mistake that he made early on in the ball game on extended drives, to be able to step into it. When we did have those extended drives in the second half, you saw what our offense is capable of. You saw what we can do. You saw everything that everything preseason, all the rat poison said that what we look like. So it really was that tipped interception, Sam. Drones went a lot of the year early on last year without throwing his first pick.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he had a lot of time to get comfortable, to get confident. And then that first pick on, you know, within his first 3 throws, you know, that was just a rough turn of events.
That was the biggest play in terms of expected points added change in the game. That was almost an entire touchdown. Virginia Tech was driving. They had the ball on the 50-yard line. So that was, in my mind, the biggest play of the game. Obviously, you know, a 4th down stop in overtime to win it. That's obvious. But that play, if that ball isn't intercepted, Tech wins the game. Like that's in my mind. Robert, your thoughts on kind of the first half of this game? Virginia Tech found themselves down 17-0.
Yeah, Sam, I think it was you who texted the group chat that we all have with Sons of Saturday after that interception, and you said that was a 2022 ODU play.
Yep.
And sure was. Yeah, I mean, I think Mike just explained it well. He got punched in the mouth, and Mike, I'm curious your thoughts on this too. Sam Acho during the broadcast, which, you know, he was okay as an announcer, but one point that he made was that Vanderbilt was doing a lot to disguise their blitzes, disguise their coverages, and try to confuse Kyron, especially in terms of him having those pre-snap reads and just making those difficult for him. And I can imagine that would throw him off if he's not able to see what's going on. Did you see any of that? And if so, how would that affect Kyron?
Yeah, they were doing a lot of, you know, what you call sky and cloud coverage. So they're showing a too high safety look, which if you're a run-based offense like Virginia Tech, you see 2 high safeties and you're like, oh, heck yeah, we're going to run the ball. You know, and what they were doing is that they were showing those 2 high safety looks, and then right before the snap, they were either rolling one safety down to the strong side, one safety down to the weak side, and rolling those guys back. So now they're into a cover 3 look. So they're, you know, kind of dropping those 2 corners back because they don't want to get beat deep with our skill positions. And they have the 1 deep high safety, and they're allowing their outside linebackers to cover the flats. But they're kind of rolling those guys down in that motion. And I know I'm using my Frank Beamer fist here, but those guys are it really, if you're not used to seeing it, and this is one thing that, you know, I know Sam, you mentioned it, and Pete mentioned it too in our group chat. I'm watching the game on TV. Y'all are at the game, but that, you know, we haven't seen a Clark Lee defense since he was at Notre Dame.
Yeah,
Clark Lee has turned the reins over on that Vanderbilt defense for years. So I don't know if they were looking in a whole lot of film from the Clark Lee Notre Dame days where he used to do that. So I don't know necessarily if that was something that they were really anticipating happening. And that's what happens in that first week. You know, you don't really have a whole lot of film. People aren't showing a whole lot off of spring footage. You know, you're trying to look at stuff from previous years and seeing what they're going to do. I don't know necessarily if that was necessarily the case. And I think Pry said that after the game is so much. They threw some stuff at us that we weren't necessarily expecting. But, you know, and I think that was really the biggest thing we saw in that first half, Robert.
Yeah, and I think I agree. And I think that it felt like, talking about the game plan, it felt like the team was prepared to play Vanderbilt last season. That's what the game plan felt like. And you know, you would have hoped, and again, we weren't in the room, so we don't know what they were going through, but it sure seemed like they could have used more time looking at those Notre Dame defenses and New Mexico State's offense last year.
Yes,
in particular, I would have watched every play from that Auburn game last year.
Yeah, and in addition to what you're saying, Robert, there were multiple times where we were, and it changed towards the end of the second half. We started making those adjustments, but in the beginning of the game where Pavia was really carving us up, we were slanting our defensive line. And against a mobile, and hopefully we change this because we're going to play mobile quarterbacks for the most part the rest of the year. You know, I think there's only 1 or 2 non-dual threats that we're going to see. When you slant your defensive line one way or the other, you're basically giving that quarterback the read pre-snap. So you're basically saying, hey, all I got to do is sit there and almost slow mesh it like you're Wake Forest and wait to see what those defensive line guys are going to do. If they go this direction, I'm going to go in the opposite. So if it's the running back that's supposed to go the opposite way, or if it's me that's supposed to go the opposite way, That's what I'm going to do. So we were helping him out. Now, towards the end of the first half and through the meat of the second half, we started running stunts and twists with the defensive line, and that really kind of made them kind of stand pat. And you kind of saw some different effects. We were able to get some stops, some 3-and-outs every once in a while. We were able to kind of slow things down. But we were really, with our game plan, we were just saying, hey, we're going to outspeed you. And it's not necessarily the best play call is going to make sense. We're just going to out-athlete you. And, these guys are used to playing against SEC teams. They're not, with the exception of Pavia, obviously. I mean, he's got one game against Auburn. But the rest of Vanderbilt's line, they're not going to be intimidated by it. So they said, okay, we're just going to take what we gave them and then react off of that. And that's why they ran the ball, 80% of the time in that first half.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about this too, because it really looked like, especially at the linebacker level, Virginia Tech wasn't reading that option well. You're supposed to have, all right, I stick with they ran out of the pistol. They ran a read option over and over again, with sometimes loop around a wide receiver or run it with the fullback and turn that into basically a triple option, speed option out to the side. It looked like our linebackers were just totally lost on who to go after. A lot of times you had that outside linebacker cutting in, trying to get the dive play, when clearly under every single rule of defending the option, you stick outside and you attack the quarterback and you let somebody else come and get the running back. They hired 2 option offensive coaches and they got an option quarterback in the portal. How were you not ready to defend the option week 1?
It's really hard if you don't see it every day at full speed as fast. I mean, it was the same thing that Virginia Tech experienced when we were playing Paul Johnson and Georgia Tech back in the day. You can put all of the best guys that you have on scout team, you can do everything. But unless you have guys that are running at full speed and that's all they do, I mean, we really should have been truly, instead of not even New Mexico, we should have been watching Coastal Carolina film, because that's where Tim Beck was prior to New Mexico State. He was there at he was there with Coastal Carolina with Grayson McCall and all those guys. It was that offense. Now what you're looking at too is you're looking at a completely different type of option with that pistol attack. When they were in that single back set pistol look, it's pretty straightforward. You're gonna have one guy that's designated, designated on quarterback, the other guy's designated on the running back. That's fine. But when you're also running with that extra back there, when they were running in that 21 personnel, they were or that 12 personnel, they were sitting there with that extra fullback that was going to kick out the end, and they were blocking back against the grain, creating a hole. And now you're left with 2 guys that are scraping downhill. Usually it's going to be a safety on the running back. It's usually going to be an outside linebacker on the quarterback. So they're going to have something along those lines but if you blow any type of assignment on that upfront coverage, and a couple times, and this is what we'll pick up on a lot on the Hokie hitter this week, so make sure to pay attention to that. A couple times our defensive ends, whether it was Cole Nelson, whether it was APR, or whether it was Burgos, we got sucked back to the inside. So they were trying to reach block us on the outside and get to our outside shoulder on the defensive end. And we took the bait, stepped to the inside, and they just washed us on down and allowed Pavia and those running backs to get to the outside and get to the edge. So it seems super simple, and it really comes down to discipline and assignment football, the same thing that we had to deal with Paul Johnson for a decade when he was at Georgia Tech.
Minus the offensive lineman diving at kneecaps. Glad we didn't have
no
to deal
cut
with
blocking.
that.
Yeah, that's right. No cut blocking.
Yeah, it just seems like the Hokies, no matter which way you slice it, we're not prepared for this game. Offensively, defensively, the offense picked it up, but it just seems like the coaching staff was not prepared for this game. Well, no matter what way you look at it, and that's disappointing, because this is year 3, and you knew exactly what the opposing offense was going to run, and even if the defense was running coverages differently, running slants differently, it's still the same personnel back there. And it was not a very good personnel. And you saw later in that game, there was a lot of open plays in the secondary and a lot of busted coverages, and Virginia Tech was not ready to take advantage of that in the first game. Mike, as we kind of wrap up talking Hokies here, this has been awesome. And first off, you shouted it out, but look at Hokie Hitter. It'll be on the Sons of Saturday website page. It'll be on the YouTube page. We're going to have some awesome film analysis content from Coach Mike Holmes. How do you get the locker room back? How do you reset here? Because you got a game coming up against Marshall at home. And I mean, must win is an understatement, I think, for that game.
Absolutely.
And this is a Marshall team that's not expected to be very good. Yet another one. They won 45-3 last week. And I don't care that they played Stony Brook. They won 45-3 and you lost. How do you get your team motivated and ready and game plan for the next week?
I think the biggest thing is that I think you show them the film, you show them where you need to correct, and you move on, but you hunker down on the fact that you got your butt whooped. You know, if there's one thing, none of these guys, none of these players, none of these coaches went into that game hoping to lose. I know that's a thing that, you know, a lot of people on social media like talk about, but the pride aspect of what it's like in that locker room, they're not going to want to go out there and lose again. I know, you know, the betting line in Vegas has started at, you know, 13-14 and it's bumped up to 17.
It's up to 20.
It's up to 20 now.
It's up to 20 now. Yep.
Wow.
Whole touchdown.
I mean, yeah, it's one of those situations where this game will prove who we actually have in the locker room. Do we have dudes in the locker room that can overcome and win? I'll be honest with you, that and a lot of teams, it's happened to a lot of teams this week. The first half of the first game is an anomaly. Throw it out. It's over. It's done. Once you start getting into the nitty-gritty and you started getting into adjustments, and you started getting into overall athletes and depth, we beat Vanderbilt in the second half.
Yeah,
now,
that's
granted,
a great point.
We started them out with a 17-point spot. That can't happen. But we beat them in the second half of the game. We played better than them in the second half of the game. We got up by 7 points towards the end. We just couldn't close.
Mm-hmm.
It was that is what your learning experience is. That is your teaching moment for this week and for the rest of the season. Hey guys, you started out playing your worst football that you can possibly play. You battled back, you had the lead. However, it just wasn't enough. Don't let it get to that point next week. Don't let it ever get to that point going forward. And now I think from this point going forward, it's kind of like how we looked at the team going into Boston College last year. I believe going into Boston College, we were coming off of Florida State, right?
Yeah.
If I'm not wrong, Florida State, we came out, we played hard, but we got whooped. We came out that next week, Boston College, noon game. We rolled out there and we took it to them from the first snap. And from that point on, we really didn't look back a whole lot, minus Louisville for the rest of that season. And so I think this is your moment where you can rally them around. I think that if one thing that our coaching staff has is that motivational factor, where we can talk those guys up and we can get them fired up and getting them going. It's just really, really difficult when you're off your normal schedule and and you can say it, it's an 11 o'clock kick, whatever you want to say, but it's the first game. I really think these kids were drinking the rat poison. I really do.
Yeah.
They were reading their own press clippings for whatever it is, but by the time they woke up, it was too late. And that's your lesson that you got to teach. You got to teach about going forward.
Yeah.
All
and
great points. Go on, Robert.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I said this in our group chat, but I mean, the last 4 games that Tech has lost, they have won their next game by an average of 24.5 points. So, you keep that trend up and you cover the spread against Marshall. So hopefully that happens.
That's a great little nugget there, Robert. And some reason for some hope. Coach Holmes, I got one more question for you after these two quick ad reads, because we're going to talk about two of our sponsors here with Sons of Saturday. First up is Jack and Coke. You see the can at the bottom of the screen. Jack and Coke, 2 legends, 1 can. Jack and Coke, the #1 cocktail in the world, is now available in a can. It's true Jack Daniel's Tennessee whiskey mixed with Coca-Cola or Coca-Cola Zero Sugar. If you're watching your figure a little bit, they're available in a can at your local grocery store and convenience store. 2 legends, 1 can, Jack and Coke, ready to drink. Put it on ice, throw it in your cooler for tailgate. It is the absolute perfect tailgate drink and beverage. It is going to make it much smoother. Jack and Coke, 2 legends, 1 can. Please drink responsibly. And we are also brought to you by our good friends at Roback, the best performance athleisure wear in the game. Nashville was full of Roback polos, whether it was the classic state of Virginia print or the special collegiate Virginia Tech specific print. It was everywhere. You know Roback. It is performance activewear designed for those who crave activity. They are continuing to put new drops on there all the time, so check it out. Use code 2DEEPVT with your first order to get 20% off at roback.com. If you already got something, use another email. Use a friend's email. Get a gift for a friend. They make great Christmas presents. The hoodies especially. Everyone loves the hoodies. It is incredible. Use code 2DEEPVT for 20% off your order. Roback, crave activity. Coach Holmes, the last question I got for you, and this is one. Sam Shutt came in here early. I wanted to ask you about this because this was, credit to me, I was pretty calm considering how this game was going. This was the only time I lost my cool in the stands, because you have 6-7 months to figure out who's on punt safe and who's on punt return. And you have 99 numbers and 65 players. So how the heck do you have 2 number zeros on the field on punt safe?
No one wants to hear this answer, but it happens all the time. We not so much in high school, because you can't double up on numbers really, just because of you can't buy enough jerseys unless you live in Georgia or Texas or South Carolina. So from what I have gathered from hearing about this, so apparently Jay Lane was supposed to be the guy that was back there. He was either dehydrated or banged up. And so we're trying to get a guy out there to go back and return punts. And number 2 on the depth chart was Ollie Jennings. So he goes out there. And so I understand that, Pry's call, the comeback on Pry on this, in my personal opinion, is completely out of bounds. Yes, the buck stops with him. He's the head coach. That's what it's all going to come back to. This is, in my opinion, this is something he has made the decision to call punt safe. That's his call. At that point, he has delegated responsibility to Stu Holt. He's delegated responsibility to everybody else, all the quality control people, to make sure the personnel that are on the field is 100% accurate. The head coach cannot be 100% responsible for all of the personnel getting on the field in the right spot at the same time. He's got too much going on. This is coming from somebody who, when he first started as head coach, I used to try to micromanage everything, and you get caught in stuff like that. It just can't happen. So this is something that this is Brent Pry delegating authority. Now, granted, as any good coach is going to, he's going to fall on the sword. He's going to fall on the grenade, and he's going to say, yes, this is my fault. It stops with me. But I guarantee in the Merriman Center yesterday, there were meetings going on where he said, listen, guys, this can't friggin' happen anymore. You got to make sure that our number 1 and our number 2 guys, whoever's back there, we know that Kelly Lawson's got to be out there. Kelly Lawson is playing linebacker. He's on our punt rush team. He can't leave. He's got to be on there. So whoever goes back there, we either have a jersey flip or whatever we got to do, because Tucker Holloway's out. We got Allie Jennings back there, or whatever. Well, we can't have this happen again. And I guarantee you won't see it anymore. If I can guarantee anything, it's not going to happen anymore.
Better
But
not.
the throwback on Pry on this, in my opinion, is just a little bit OB, just because it's not necessarily it is him, but it's not. But again, it's something that can happen. It's something that can happen, and it's something that there was a dropped ball, and it's not even really Stu Holt. There's probably somebody on quality control. There's somebody on there's 20 coaches on the sideline. Somebody can't get a jersey on there. And then Price said, "Yeah, I saw it, and it was too late, and I couldn't call a timeout in time." Yeah, I get that, but then that was probably somebody in the booth, getting in his ear saying, "Hey, we got 2 zeros on there," and by the time the ball's already snapped. So that was the biggest, what you want to say, coaching blunder, I guess, that you want to call it. But for it coming back on Pry, I don't think that's necessarily right. But the buck does stop with him.
Yeah, it's one of those, again, I think it's become a saying in Virginia Tech land. That's an ODU play. I mean, that is just one of those plays that you can't really truly explain it away, and it just happens. And that was, I mean, Tech could have had the game won at that point. Like, I really do think that is one of the more unfortunate plays for that team, because they had done, like you said, so much good work to get back in that game and take the lead. It is deflating, but you got to learn from it.
And Sam, you think about it this way too: the tipped interception, and that punt penalty, that's 10 points.
Yeah, and I think you can also throw in there the 3 fumbles and no recoveries.
Yeah, I think we had 5 opportunities at a turnover. I think there were 4 times the ball hit the ground, and then there was 1 missed pick with Delane on a tipped ball.
Yep.
Yeah, and so we had 5 opportunities where the ball hit the ground. We didn't hop on it. You had those 10 points, but who knows what would have happened on that drive. I mean, we could have probably at least gotten a field goal out of that drive without the tipped interception from Drones. So, I mean, think about the point swings in that game. And again, you're playing it. We want to say we want to think Vanderbilt is Stony Brook. We want to think that. That is an SEC team. They dip from the same talent pool. They have a better recruiting base and better recruiting outcomes than Virginia Tech has overall year after year. They have, even though they're the bottom of the barrel of the SEC, they're an SEC team. So like, you can't give them those opportunities to stay in the ball game. And those are those things that change the tones of a game, and sometimes you can't recover, no matter who you are.
Yep, all great points. Coach Holmes, we'll keep you. It's been awesome. Thank you so much. Again, people, check out Hokie Hitter on sonsofsaturday.com as well as on the YouTube page. Let's just talk some week 2 real quickly here. Any games, Robert, that are pointing out to you as we look to wrap up college football Monday of week 1?
Yeah, I think a game that not enough people are talking about is App State traveling to Clemson, South Carolina. They are an 18-point dog right now. Trivia question for the two of you guys. How many times has Dabo Swinney started a season 0-2?
That's probably 0.
0.
Yeah.
The last time Clemson started a season winless in their first 2 games was in 1982. They started 0-1-1.
And that was the year after they won the national championship.
Correct. And they won their next 9. But
wow.
Yeah, so we are looking at some unprecedented waters here. But Clemson, I mean, if that offense, like you mentioned, Sam, the lack of explosive plays, if Clemson can't move the ball in bursts the way that they need to, App State is a really good team. I have them I mean, I have them in my playoff 12 right now, and because I think that they are the best G5 team, and Sean Clark, he's no stranger to this. App State's known as the Giant Killers. I think they could go down there and win. I really do.
It's definitely a tough game. I think that's one of the ones to really look at. We talked about Boise State and Oregon, and there's the obvious ones, right? Texas traveling to Michigan, that's a huge game. Iowa State, big rivalry always at the beginning of the year. Another one I'm looking at, Kansas State traveling to Tulane. Kansas State has not gone undefeated in non-conference play with this current coaching staff. I think that's a really, really tough game. Ullman Stadium is going to be fired up in New Orleans. Mike, anything that tickles your fancy on week 2?
All right. So for ACC implications and for what we have coming up, Georgia Tech, Syracuse. It's a noon game, ACC network. Georgia Tech got to go to the Carrier Dome. Georgia Tech's 2-0, Syracuse 1-0. I want to see if that Georgia Tech defense is legit and for real, or if they're pretenders after what they did against Florida State. I want to see if Kyle McCord can go against a little bit better defense than he faced this week. And I want to see, if Haynes King can beat the Carrier Dome curse. I think that'll for ACC implications. I think the Georgia Tech Syracuse game is going to be massive.
I think so too.
Yeah, that's a huge one. And then in terms of ACC versus SEC, I think the SEC is leading the charge in that right now. But there is a big one happening in Charlotte, Tennessee, and the NC State Wolfpack. NC State, maybe they were just not awake for that game, a Thursday night game. I don't know. They've got to figure it out on. Yeah, they were looking ahead. They got to figure it out.
Yeah, that felt
on
like
defense.
A trap game for sure.
Yep, and Tennessee is going to put up points. So can Grayson McCall play cleaner and get that offense going? I think NC State has a chance in that game. Probably don't fancy them to win, but it could be a really fun game to watch and a great opportunity for the ACC to save some face here early in the season. And then, of course, your Hokies, 4:30 p.m. kickoff in Lane Stadium against the Marshall Thundering Herd. The Hokies are 3-touchdown favorites. Gross, disgusting. Somebody at DraftKings is playing a really cruel trick on us. It will be a tough game. Marshall is going to be a tough team. They are not very good. Like, I would say Vanderbilt has a significant amount more talent than they do.
And they're not well coached. Like, that's
they
the
are not
difference
well
about
coached.
Vanderbilt. Yeah.
Mm-mm. So it is going to be an opportunity for the Hokies to right the ship. If they go out there and they cover that lofty spread against Marshall, I think people are going to be feeling a lot better in Blacksburg, but we will see. And for the 520 plus people who have joined us live tonight, thank you so much. Even after a tough loss, we always love getting on here and talking that good football talk. It is officially fall. Leaves are changing. The wind is blowing. Don't take these days for granted, even when the Hokies break your heart, guys. And until next time, go Hokies.
Go Hokies.
Go Hokies.